Anguilla, beautiful beaches, friendly people, and a strong business community. The Anguilla Chamber of Commerce helps to enhance, promote, and support the Anguillan business community and economy through offering economy-stimulating initiatives, innovative advice, and professional expertise.
We're here to support the business community.
The Anguilla Chamber of Commerce is now rated among 21 of the most innovative chambers in the world, representing your products and services worldwide.
Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we're ready now. So join us now.
Find out what the Anguilla Chamber of Commerce can offer you as a member or a newcomer to the Anguilla business community. Join the Anguilla Chamber of Commerce today, your partner in business.
We ask your blessings on this meeting tonight as we come together for the good of this island to hear what those who are holding themselves up for elective office to lead this country have to say. We pray that your midst will be in our presence, that you guide the thoughts of everyone so that they can put their best effort forward, which will inure to the benefit of the people of Anguilla. Almighty Father, we pray and ask your blessings on our country at this time. And we ask that you be in our midst over the next couple of weeks as we make what is probably the most important decision many of us will ever make. And we ask that we be guided by your Holy Spirit. This I pray and I ask in Jesus' holy name. Amen. Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen, and let me take this opportunity now to apologize for a late start, which was entirely beyond the control of the Anguilla Chamber of Commerce. But nonetheless, we apologize, and we will now commence our debate, and we will still have a full debate for the next 2 hours. For those of you who don't know, I'm Keith Lake. I'm the president of Anguilla Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I welcome you to our 2015 election debate. This debate will focus on issues that concern our members, and most of the questions will be focused on economic issues and what can be done to fix them. The questions were put together from a wide cross-section of contributors, and we hope that the responses will be informative. I now take this opportunity to welcome the candidates who have so graciously decided to be here this evening to let the people of Anguilla know their thoughts on how they're going to get this country moving again. I now welcome Ms. Hamilton Webster, Independent District 1, whose symbol is the fish. Mr. Sutcliffe Webster. Mr. Sutcliffe Hodge, representing the leader of the Dove Party out of District number 3, and his symbol is the dove, Mr. Hodge. Mr. Victor Banks, the leader of the AUF Party coming out of District number 4, and he's the leader of the Anguilla United Front, Mr. Banks. Mr. Statcher Warner, out of District number 6, Independent, and his symbol is the saw, Mr. Warner. It is my hope that this debate will serve to enlighten the voting public on the issues that matter. I wish all the candidates good luck. And I now welcome to the stage the moderator of tonight's debate, Mr. Winston Duncan, to the stage. When I When I asked Mr. Duncan for his bio, he told me to say simply that he's a teacher, a scout leader, an altar server, and an athletic coach. But I've since had an opportunity to look at his resume, which is quite intensive. But he's a rather modest man, and let's just welcome him here to the stage. This debate will be under the full control of Mr. Duncan, and he has been provided the questions which are still sealed, and he will open them here in the presence of everyone tonight. And it is now my pleasure to leave the stage and wish Mr. Duncan good luck, and everything is in your hands, sir.
Good evening, and thank you very much, Mr. Lake. Let me adopt the protocol already established by Mr. Lake, and let us get straight into the rules for this evening's debate. The moderator will ask prepared questions, keeping them short and limited to one topic. The candidates may take no more than 2 minutes to respond to any question. Let me repeat. The candidates may take no more than 2 minutes to respond to any question. After the candidate completes their answers, any other candidate or candidates criticized by name may receive 45 seconds or will receive 45 seconds to rebut the charge, and this is at the sole discretion of the moderator. After the panelists finish asking questions, at least 3 questions submitted by audience members will be posed to the candidates by the moderator. Each candidate will receive 2 minutes to make his or her closing remarks, and the debate will end. Please note, no cell phones are allowed, no personal attacks are allowed. A scratch pad and a pencil is provided for your use. The timekeeper for this evening's proceedings is Mr. Hakeem Alves. And do note, this event is being streamed via internet and also via radio. Also note that at between 9 and 9:30, live on Radio Anguilla, there will be a commentary with Mr. John Benjamin QC, along with Mr. Conrad Rogers and Mr. Mervyn Sanders. As was stated earlier, the envelopes with the questions, they've been sealed. So just like the participants in this evening's event, this will be the first time I'm seeing these questions. So good luck to each and every participant. And members of the listening audience, please do listen carefully. I encourage you to hold off your applause until the end so that other panelists may have time to compose their thoughts. Okay, we begin with question 1, and we're going to start with Mr. Hodge. See that he's right here. Please listen carefully. Dr. Martin Luther King coined a popular quote, "The fierce urgency of now," and we quote, "This is no time for complacency or apathy." Feedback from our membership indicates that there is an urgency of now with respect to the economy. Please tell our membership and the Anguilla populace in general what 3 actions you plan to take that will result in measurable positive economic activity in the next 12 months. Let me repeat, I'll just read the question itself. Please tell our membership and the Anguilla populace in general what 3 actions you plan to take that will result in measurable positive economic activity in the next 12 months. Mr. Hodge.
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Duncan, and good evening to everyone. think that Anguilla is at a critical stage in its development. We have seen Anguilla's economy contract considerably since the global economic downturn. As a matter of fact, Anguilla's economy contracted the most of all of the OECS member states. The three things that I think are absolutely critical. First of all, we got to get a handle on water. Water is the source of life, and the water crisis in Anguilla needs to be addressed post-haste. Additionally, one of the things that even Obama pointed out in Jamaica just today is that there is a need for us to find a solution for cheap energy. We of the Dove Party are committed to move quickly to get Anguilla to move 100% using renewable energy within 12 months, using fossil fuel as a backup. We will also, with immediate effect, move the process forward to amend the immigration legislation to allow for active retired people to come and live among us. The challenge that we have in Anguilla, our population is small, but we just don't need to increase our population with anybody. We need to increase our population with people who have spending power so they can spend money among us. By so doing, what we will find is that the cost of living for all of us will come down because there are more people to spread the cost of running this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. The same question will be posed to Ms. Webster. Do you need a repeated question, ma'am?
Please.
Please tell our membership and the Anguilla populace in general what 3 actions you plan to take that will result in measurable positive economic activity in the next 12 months.
Good evening, everyone. And certainly the word now is actually, there's so much agreement in relation to what Dr. Martin Luther King said, that it's reflected in our mantra, a new Anguilla now. The 3 actions that I would take, as you know, my symbol is the fish, and that represents vision, infrastructure, social development, or social services, and healthcare. The first action that I will take is in relation to vision, because I believe that, particularly as regards District 1, but this is a model that can be followed throughout Anguilla with success, I think vision represents that transformational force that we can rely on. The first and very easy thing to do, I think, is to do away with the fuel levy. I think that it's also critical that we do away with any surcharges that exist that would hamper fishermen going out there. I think we need to provide access to capital. I will be moving forward with proposals in the House of Assembly when I'm elected to provide us and our fishermen and young entrepreneurs with access to capital. The third thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do away right away with the interim stabilization levy. I believe that it stagnates our young entrepreneurs. I think that there is no resource in the economy that will allow it to yield anything at this time, and I will do away with it and simultaneously put in place initiatives that we call in our campaign low-hanging proposals. We pursue initiatives that will allow us to bring in revenues. And you didn't ask about the fourth thing, but I want to tell you that we already know where we can get quick money, and that's from international financial services.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webster. Mr. Warner, the same question for you, sir.
Thank you. Today I was browsing through, I guess it's one of the party manifestos, and the first thing that I looked for was what did they say about energy. Because a number of us is talking about energy, but I don't think that anyone is making the necessary linkages of energy to the rest of the economy. And I must say, after reading that manifesto, I walk away as disappointed as I expected. Energy is critical to the development of Anguilla, cheap, affordable energy, not shaving cents off the high cost that we have right now. Doing away with the fuel charge will do very little to actually reduce the cost of energy, because at the end of the day, if we take the fuel charge off 100%, and we'll still have an expensive energy platform. So I would fix energy, and I am looking for 100%, not 100% in solar panels. I'm looking for 100% in solar thermal, that fossil fuels will become a thing of the past, which it will in 20 years' time anyhow. The other area that I believe will bring immediate economic benefits to Anguilla is immigration reform. We have a number of foreigners within our midst, and our xenophobia is not allowing them to make the contributions that they could be making. Our immigration policy, where we allow a single man or a single woman to come in on a work permit but exclude their families, is not helping us socially, and it's not helping us economically, because we have a lot of the money that's being made in Anguilla, rather than circulated within the economy, is being exported via Western Union, our banking system, however. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. Mr. Banks?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and I would like to commend the Chamber of Commerce for having this event. The first thing that the Anguilla United Front would move into, coming into the first 12 months of our term, we recognize that the situation in Anguilla has come as a result of lack of economic growth over the period of the last 5 years. It means that we have to create more jobs, more business opportunities, encourage more investment, and put training in place so that our human resources can take advantage of the opportunities that present themselves as a result of these initiatives. These things come from adopting an approach to delivering more economic growth in this country. The first thing that we will put in place is look at the establishment of a tourism investment committee to look at the various projects that we are embarking upon very early in our term. One being the facilitating investment in marina development, and the second being looking at the possibility of improving access to Anguilla. So those are the first initiatives that we will trust the Tourism Investment Committee that will be established and strengthened with. The second one will be establishing a diversification committee, a committee to deal with diversification issues and investment, because Anguilla cannot survive only depending on a core industry of tourism. So we'll actively initiate the development of a committee dealing with the diversification of our economy. This will deal with the issues to which Mrs. Webster referred, the fishing sector, international financial services, having a more targeted and proper approach to that sector to ensure that there are opportunities for Anguillan growth throughout that period. And finally, the most important aspect altogether is looking at the entire transformation of a country, and that can come from energy initiatives and alternative energy, and making sure that the economy can deal with those aspects of or development that's affecting us right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. We now move on to the second question. Please listen carefully. There is general agreement that if you fix problems with tourism, Anguilla will experience an immediate economic upturn. Several government consultants have made their top 2 recommendations in addressing tourism issues to be 1, cleaning up the island, and 2, solving the extraordinary discourteous nature of our frontline staff at immigration and customs. Many call these issues low-hanging fruit, meaning they do not require you to break the budget to fix them. Question being, what specific actions you will take in your first 180 days to address this problem? We will start with Mr. Banks.
Can you repeat the question, please?
What specific actions will you take in your first 180 days to address this problem?
And the problem again?
The problems being, 1, cleaning up the island and solving the extraordinary discourteous nature of our frontline staff at Immigration and Customs.
First of all, keeping a clean island, a clean environment depends on the involvement and participation of everybody in the community. So the first thing that you have to do is a period of education within our school system, within our community groups, programs on the radio to bring attention to the importance of keeping Anguilla clean, and also putting initiatives that involve funding behind them to ensure that these things get done. It means that the Department of Environment will have to start training programs and educational programs within the community to make that happen. As far as the frontline people are concerned, we must ensure that persons working not only in the government departments in customs and immigration and all those frontline areas, but also persons who are working in stores and restaurants and so forth, that we make available to them training programs and customer relationships. The way that they deal with customers should be a part of their job training experience. And these are the ways that we will deal with these two issues within the first 180 days.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. Mr. Warner?
Thank you. Cleaning up the island should not be a very difficult task. Trimming the bush, derelict vehicles. I feel that all derelict vehicles that people have around the yards, that some of them claim that they have for spare parts, etc., that we should designate an area close to the Carito dump and keep them there, even if it's a fenced area, but just have them out of public sight, because as you drive around the island, it is really disgraceful. We also need to limit the use of plastics on the island, because most of them ends up beside the road. When it comes to looking at the attitudes of Anguillians, there are a number of factors to that, and that is something that we cannot change overnight, but we must work on. We have to, as Mr. Banks said, we have to have training programs for all of our frontline staff, but generally I think across the island that we are slowly developing what is the wrong attitude for having a tourist economy based on tourism. We also need to have, and if possible even make it illegal to have politicians race fighting, because 99% of our tourists are white, and there are too many politicians and aspiring politicians who make their living by spreading negative statements among our young people about white people this and white people that. The fight that we have with the British, all of that don't help. And we can only do this through education, and we also have to find ways to raise the self-esteem of our people. And I think over the last 20 years, we have gone backwards rather than forward in this area.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. We'll now move to Ms. Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. If you'd repeat the question.
The question being, what specific actions will you take in your first 180 days to address this problem? The problems are cleaning up the island and solving the extraordinary discourteous nature of our frontline staff at Immigration and Customs.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I will start by saying that I have seen, several of the various consultants' reports, and there's always the number one problem of cleaning the environment. I'm not waiting to be elected and for the first 180 days to do it. In District 1, you will already see that we are establishing a reputation for a clean environment. And yes, it's taken a private sector energy, it's taken investment from me personally, but we have started by clearing the beaches, clearing the sides of the roads, removing, but also through the community center, teaching the value of a clean environment and clean environment, we say express who you are. It raises your self-esteem when your environment is clean, and it's making a difference. I believe we can go throughout Anguilla with this model. It's working in District 1. I'm not yet elected. I'm sure that in 108 days, with the right incentives, we'll be able to achieve that island-wide. It will no more appear in consultants' reports. The second thing, and that is the attitude of Anguillians, as one of the persons dubbed it, one of our candidates. I say this: I believe Anguillians are the best, most friendly and loving people in the world. Can you believe that? When I look at what, thought leaders focus on when they talk about happiness and sharing, start rolling out a happy environment that takes account of who we are as a people, loving and friendly.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webster. Mr. Hodge? Okay. There is a general agreement that if you fix problems with tourism, Anguilla will experience an immediate economic upturn. Several government consultants have made their top 2 recommendations in addressing tourism issues to be 1, cleaning up the island, and 2, solving the extraordinary discourteous nature of our frontline staff at Immigration and Customs. Many call these issues low-hanging fruit, meaning they do not require you to break the budget to fix them. What specific actions will you take in your first 108 days to address this problem?
I think that what is critical is that we have got to align the product with the promotion. And I think that has been one of Anguilla's challenges for quite some time. And that is, we project Anguilla as an upmarket 5-star destination. But that 5-star presence, unfortunately, is only seen at the hotel property. What we need to do is to align the product so that the experience from the time you get on the ferry or from the time you enter the airport terminal, there is a 5-star atmosphere and there's a 5-star attitude. So we need to freshen the place up. But it requires that something that is in our psyche, we've got to be convinced that it's about all of us. It's about all of us, which means that we need to have a radical training program. In the schools, we need to have programs on radio that speaks to the importance of tourism and how it touches the life of everybody on this island directly and indirectly. Tourism is everybody's business, and we just can't pay lip service to it. We gotta live it. We gotta live it every day. The way, just today, I saw a road sign, a tsunami road sign, turned upside down and the arrows pointing in the opposite direction. You can't read it. That's not impressive. You look at all the curves around the roundabouts and the like, they're filthy. Take a little bit of paint, freshen them up every couple of months. If the place looks fresh, there is a good chance that people will respond differently as well. And we need to have litter containers more readily available throughout the island, so that if someone is walking with a bottle or can, we don't expect them to walk a half a mile with that empty bottle or can if they're drinking. So we need to have more litter containers in areas where people are likely to frequent. So we have to align the product with the promotion, and we got to recognize that tourism is our business.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. The next question, we'll start with Mr. Hodge, and it reads, many persons have said that paying money to government is an extremely frustrating, inconvenient, and time-consuming process. For example, our members point to long lines at the post office to collect home shopping items, customs procedures, and limited office hours at Treasury. If you agree with this statement, what actions are you prepared to institute to correct these obstacles, and in what time frame? If you agree with this statement, what actions are you prepared to institute to correct these obstacles, and in what time frame?
What happens in the private sector is that whenever you have a situation of queuing, it is important that you understand the process and the human resource that's required to address the queue. This is a standard practice that is addressed by many establishments, and I worked for such an establishment where we actually did timestamps from the time someone joins a queue until they leave to determine the elapsed time. And we're then forced to look at the processes to see where the opportunities are to either reduce the process cycle or to see whether or not there is a need to increase the number of personnel serving. One of the things that I personally am big on is the one best way, and that's a management concept that speaks to identify a process that is working well anywhere in the world. So best in class, anywhere in the world, and then you try to implement it in Anguilla. Singapore is a place that comes to mind. Singapore has removed a lot of bureaucracy over the years because they focus on delivering excellent customer service. And in the process of delivering customer service, you need to look at process, you need to look at training, and you need to look at what constitutes efficiency for delivering that specific service. Because while you might have a need to have a longer waiting time, maybe when you're processing documents at customs, if you're going to other locations where the process should be simpler, we got to try to tighten it to minimize the elapsed time that is used for that particular service. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. The next question, we move on to Ms. Webster. The question being, do you need me to reread it? I'll just give you the question.
Is this the same question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Moderator, please repeat it. Thank you.
Many persons have said that paying money to government is an extremely frustrating, inconvenient, and time-consuming process. For example, our members point to long lines at the post office to collect home shopping items, customs procedures, and limited office hours at Treasury. If you agree with this statement, what actions are you prepared to institute to correct these obstacles, and in what time frame?
Thank you very much. I think that I agree with that writer that it's very, very frustrating, it's very time consuming, and really it is very unproductive, and an unproductive society is not headed anywhere. The future, it's just a matter of a ticking bomb. So it's something that we have to address right away. How do we address it? It has to do with the vision for our future. And our future, a prosperous future, and certainly the vision of our campaign, is that we will be smart. You know, we will be an ICT focal point in the world. We can do it because we're small and beautiful. Our young people are able to go with it. And I think in terms of those long lines, if we start living, you know, that efficiency and that productivity, other people in the world will start looking to us to be the standard for those kinds of transactions. So I envisage where you can come in absolutely in short order with a smartphone, produce your receipts, share them, and get through customs in no time at all. I think there is where the outsider first encounters, you know, that frustration, and I want to remove it right away by moving in line with our vision to a future where technology is the thing that defines us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webster. Mr. Warner?
Yes, thank you.
Same question.
Thank you. I believe that Anguilla's small size can work to its benefit in a number of things. And paying government taxes, etc., it don't have to be as difficult as we make it. You know, they say small is the new big, and I believe that with creativity and technology, we can make Anguilla a model nation and once again make it the envy of some of our neighbors. Paying customs duties, which I believe in a modern Anguilla should be phased out and replaced with a sales tax, even though our argument right now is that we won't be able to collect the sales tax because we don't have the will at the moment to collect the accommodation tax. That's our problem. We can fix that. But customs duties has become somewhat of a nuisance, paying it, and a nuisance to economic growth. But even if we keep the system as it is right now, it don't have to operate the way it is. We use what is called a ACOCI wall, which is a fully computerized system, but we like to keep the old and the new. And then it becomes a problem. Because right now you have to upload everything to customs, then download it, and print it, take it, and then they watch them and they give it back to you. I think if we were to fix that problem in customs, we'll save our acreage in the rainforest for the amount of useless paper that we use. You know, so yes, we can fix that, but we have to do it on the platform, on tax reform. We can't just do it, you know, just for the moment. But we need to make those fundamental changes to the way that we are doing business in Anguilla. And so far, we have been scared of doing that because we are sticking with what we believe is working. But right now, keeping customs duties and next door is duty-free. It's not helping Anguilla economy, and it's time enough that all of us sitting at the table and those of us in the public realize that although it might be something that we have done for the last 30 or 40 years, it is ridiculous and we need to change it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. Mr. Banks?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. It's a given that the easier you make it for people to pay, the more likely they are to pay. That's one of the issues that we faced in 2000 coming into government. The fact that there was such a lag in collections in the various departments. And we put in place the Internal Revenue Department, as opposed from collections being done in Treasury, to facilitate and improve the collection system. But we have a long way to go. There are a lot of other things that need to be added to that. We are moving into an age of technology, and as some of the other speakers mentioned, we need to continue to improve our systems to make them more user-friendly. We need to put systems in place that do not create redundancies in the payment system. For example, if you have to pay a bill at the Treasury, and you have other issues associated with that, other services that you need from government, they all should be done in one place. People shouldn't be running around between the various departments trying to get things done. As far as the post office is concerned, that is a work in progress, and I think that we can put immediately some kind of performance review in place, overhaul of the whole system to see if we can make it more customer friendly and more swift for the payments of fees to the government of Angola. The Customs Department continues to require more and more attention. There are other aspects of government revenue that create much problems for the users. The business sector needs to get things done quickly. So we need to have an entire overhaul of the system within the first 180 days of our term to ensure that we get the revenue that's collected from everybody who needs to pay revenue. And if people want to pay revenue, if people can pay revenue easily, we can certainly get more revenue coming to the treasuries of the government of Angola.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. We now move on to question 4. It reads, it is estimated that government of Angola is owed some $25 million, representing approximately 13% of the current budget. This is not a new problem. Auditors have questioned the inability or lack of will by government to collect this money. Given the size of the amount owed and the budgetary needs of the country, do you consider this a problem? And 2, what actions would you implement to ensure timely collections of these funds? To repeat, given the size of the amount of money owed and the budgetary needs of the country, do you consider this a problem? And 2, what actions would you implement to ensure timely collections of these funds? We start with Mr. Banks.
Yeah. Thank you very much. This is a similar problem to the one you mentioned earlier. The fact that the community, persons within the community owes government money and we don't have any urgency in collecting it. There are a number of agencies who owe government money, and it means that the collection system is not working. People are not taken to court if they owe money for extended period. There are no penalties put in place that are enforced for the collection of money. And certainly $25 million represent at least 12.5% of the revenue side of the Anguillan budget. So it is significant, and it should require some intervention to make sure that that revenue is collected. Whether it means putting the correct staff in place, putting the correct legislation in place to ensure that the revenue is collected, or making sure that there are inspections done in the various properties or agencies or businesses that owe money to the government of Anguilla. We mentioned the accommodation tax and the issues with collecting that. Years ago, there was a direct intervention by the Inland Revenue Department in the various properties to look for accommodation tax and to ensure that it's paid. Villa accommodation tax and a whole range of other taxes within the government. We need, therefore, to ensure that collections is an important aspect of the revenue system. And we have to put in place the systems to make it work. Online payment of bills is one that I can think of. And certainly, when you don't pay revenue, there should be penalties involved to incentivize persons to pay on time, even if it means that if you pay on time, you get a break in terms of the amount that you pay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. Mr. Warner?
Yes, thank you. 25% of
13%.
25 billion or 13% of our budget is a significant amount, and we should be making every effort to collect that money. Accommodation tax, I will bet, makes up a significant portion of that amount owed, and I think that we are just not collecting that accommodation tax because we don't want to offend some people. But secondly, the system is also, for collecting it, is also broken. And we might have to look at unique and creative ways. I remember one guy working at a hotel said to me, why can't government can't just have a credit card account and the person swipe for the accommodation tax one time and pay it right away and it goes straight in. You know, simplistic maybe, but you know, it might be better than what we are doing right now. We are looking at that kind of money though, in terms of money that is owed to government that should be paid, but we also have another problem. And the other problem is that a number of businesses makes their living by evading taxes. And this is why, going back to the previous question, you know, customs duties again becomes part of the problem. Because right now in Anguilla you have businesses that will ship through St. Martin and then end up just paying duties from St. Martin to Anguilla and get away with all the taxes from Miami to St. Martin. You know, these are things that we have to look at, and if we can't stop it, then we have to change the system. You know, in terms of collecting, there might be many ways that we can go about making changes, but these are things that we have to have a conversation with among ourselves and, you know, with the people and say, hey, this is not benefiting us, and at the end of the day it's making everything more expensive for all of us and we need to make changes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. Ms. Webster?
Mr. Moderator, I'll ask you to repeat the question, please.
It is estimated that the government of Anguilla is owed some $25 million, representing approximately 13% of the current budget. This is not a new problem. Auditors have questioned the inability or lack of will by government to collect this money. Given the size of the amount owed and the budgetary needs of the country, do you consider this a problem? And two, what actions would you implement to ensure timely collections of these funds?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. What I would do is, first, I agree it's a problem. It's a serious problem, and it represents, at least in part, some ready access to money which we need desperately going into new administration. What I would do is I would evaluate whether or not there is opportunity to provide a creative option to the debtors, whereby giving them a big discount, relieving them, just doing something creative to let them feel compelled to deal with it now. Maybe a huge incentive, but also perhaps using the opportunity in dealing with the existing situation to do a really good cultural promotion, a cultural shift, so that everybody in the relevant establishments, almost consider it unpatriotic not to pay that accommodation tax. So we've got to do a lot of work at the cultural level, and we can do it with the existing debt, getting it in. I think if we even got half of that in, I can see that that could fund a school. I'd be very, very happy with that outcome. The second thing is going forward, and we've got to look at methodologies in collection. We perhaps can look at incentives. I don't like myself, I've been a lawyer in practice, and debt collection represents a huge part of our practice. I can tell feels at liberty to have a payment strategy plan made available to him will often acknowledge the debt and work it out. There's so many different ways. It has a lot to do with our approach. First, we've got to have the political will, and I don't think you've got to hold it like a hammer over their heads. You can do it in a really nice way. And I think that can also set the platform for what the future looks like, that they will pay their debts, because they will now know that they will be looked at as having been a poor debtor in the past.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webster. Mr. Hodge? It is estimated that the government of Anguilla is owed some $25 million, representing approximately 13% of the current budget. This is not a new problem. Auditors have questioned the inability or lack of will by government to collect this money. Given the size of the amount owed and the budgetary needs of the country, do you consider this a problem? And two, what actions would you implement to ensure timely collections of these funds?
This is actually a question that requires some empathy. If we are talking about government having debt during good times, when there's full employment and people are making money and they're not meeting up to their obligations, that's an issue, and government ought to pursue those people who owe that money. But if we're talking about these times, one has got to be very, very careful and sensitive. And when you start talking about taking people to court at a time when some people can't find money to eat, can't find money to pay their electricity bills, it is heartless and cruel to think that what you're going to do to these people is take them to court when they have no money for the basic needs of life. We have a situation where our two indigenous banks, they are carrying debt on their books of probably over $500 million because of people in this country who can't face up to those obligations. Now, there is an issue, because I am led to believe that some of this money is actually owed by properties, hotel properties in particular, that have already collected this money on behalf of the government of Anguilla. To my mind, if that still is the case, that's criminal, and that must be addressed post-haste. So I think we need to be very, very careful as we look at this particular situation. And with respect to collections generally, I think that government ought to be a bit more assertive, and maybe there is a need and opportunity to have some of this monies collected by private sector agencies, maybe through law offices and the like. But I say one has got to be careful and sensitive not to press these issues at a time when people cannot meet some of their basic survival needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. We now move to the next question. Our membership complains about the high cost of electricity and the lack of dependable water supply. Do you have a program to address the high cost of electricity and the reliability of the water supply? Please give the details of your program. Let me repeat. Our membership complains about the high cost of electricity and the lack of a dependable water supply. Do you have a program to address the high cost of electricity and the reliability of the water supply? Please give details of your program. We start with Mr. Hodge.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. This is actually a very good question. It's a topic that I spend a lot of time actually talking about on the campaign trail. We, as an island, we have a golden opportunity to position Anguilla for greatness, real growth, hope, and prosperity if we can quickly move to using renewable energy. Renewable energy, the prices have gone down by some 80% in about the last 8 or 10 years, and those prices are expected to continue to decline. There is a compelling business case that one can write that will radically reduce the price of electricity on Anguilla. And if we want to be really extreme on it and we try to keep costs at a minimum, we could reduce the price of electricity in Anguilla by as much as 80%, if not better. Fortunately, the same technology that we use for our electricity is the same technology that will be used to produce water. The biggest cost of converting seawater into potable water, that is water that you can drink and bathe with and cook with, is electricity. So we will address the water situation as well as the electricity rates at the same time, which is a fantastic thing. And there's some other wonderful spin-off benefits, such as agriculture, that we'll also benefit from in the process. However, one of the challenges that we have with water in our distribution network is that the infrastructure is in a serious state of disrepair. It is my understanding that we could be losing somewhere between 30 and 40% of the water that leaves that tank on the top of Kirkus Hill and is distributed across the island because of the poor infrastructure that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. Ms. Webster?
Please repeat the questions.
Our membership complains about the high cost of electricity and the lack of a dependable water supply. Do you have a program to address the high cost of electricity and the reliability of the water supply? Please give the details of your program.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And yes, we have a plan to address the high cost of electricity right now. And I believe that one of the short-term things that we can do immediately is to do away with certainly in relation to fishermen, I want to see that fuel will be more affordable. But in terms of the compounded charge that you now see on your electricity bill, I think just relieving our consumers of some of that, some of those charges, like for instance, the total charge, there's a levy on the charge, and that levy is on the total, which includes, if you look at your bill, there's a basic charge, then I believe there's a fixed charge that's based on the regulations, and then there's a compounded formula that makes it incredibly expensive. I think that by just going to a simple methodology, a simple formula, we can relieve it to the short term. I think it's fair that, particularly in the situation where world prices have gone down, that government should be doing that. I know they've brought it down 51%, but that is not sufficient, particularly when they take account of the compounding. I believe alternative sources of energy, they are absolutely critical. I believe some of the initiatives that the Clinton Foundation has put forward, I think there's an opportunity for Anguilla to cooperate and collaborate with initiatives like that, and we can absolutely deliver a transformed environment to Anguilla in terms of electricity, in terms of water in the world. And absolutely, I agree that we can get, that in better efficiencies with our energy systems will allow for water to be good. But the real opportunity in water and dependable has to do with technology. It's possible across the world right now to get water at 5 cents a gallon or less. There's no reason that with our abundance in water that we shouldn't be availing ourselves of that technology.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webster. Mr. Warner?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I believe that renewable energy is the way for Anguilla to go. I don't foresee Anguillans having photovoltaic cells on every roof and turning each of us into an independent producer of electricity. I believe that we need to do it at the utility level and provide Anguillians with electricity that I can foresee in the future. And as dreamy as this might sound, provide you the electricity that is going to be too cheap to be metered, because we can drastically reduce the cost of electricity. And that is not far-fetched. My system is, rather than using the sun's light, you use the sun's heat. And that heat can be stored and electricity generated. It's called solar thermal. But one of the beauties of solar thermal that I really like is that the waste heat from generating electricity is perfect for hooking up a desalination module. So rather than having to use electricity to generate heat to boil water, you just use the wasted heat, boil water, and once again, water can also become too cheap to be metered. And that is what I believe will transform the Anguillian economy, because a lot of our expenses, right now households are probably spending sometimes more than half of their income on electricity, and you still can't afford the modern benefits. Running an air-conditioned unit in Anguilla is an extreme luxury. You know, I want to see the day when we can have electricity from solar thermal that is so cheap that we don't have to worry about the cost. And that in itself will affect everything else that you do. Because many things that we do in Anguilla, we talk about fixing the problem, but we are not tackling it from its root. And one of the problems that we have in Anguilla is the high cost of living. And there are many parties and politicians, when you listen to them, jobs become somewhat of a distraction. But the problem is Anguilla, the high cost of living, and we have to fix that. Electricity is one contributor to that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. Mr. Banks, would you like me to repeat the question?
Not necessarily. The process of alternative energy and all those initiatives that are so important in creating the transformation that we are talking about, this began in 2006. When the Anguilla United Front started the Energy Policy Committee and started the draft legislation and a whole number of initiatives to progress the issue of alternative energy. We have wasted a lot of time getting there. But it's important because at this period, there are a number of businesses who are saying that the electricity costs are higher than their rent. And I'm sure that that is the case in a number of other homes as well. At the end of the day, the issue of alternative energy is and must be the way to go. And any government that comes into office, including independence, the thinking on alternative energy must be a part of the way that we do things in the future. It is important that the resources that we have, wind and sun, must be utilized to the benefit of the people of Angola. Those are things that are happening without the initiative of government, without the initiative of ANGLEC, the energy supplier. And we need to ensure that these initiatives that are now taking place are taken into account, because the legislation is not in place, for example, for tie-in with some of the independent producers of alternative energy, solar energy. The model project at Cuisinart is an example. And we need to improve that to ensure that we can reach to that point where the cost of energy can be reduced significantly. And as Mr. Hodge pointed out, water production, the highest cost of that is electricity. And if you put the sources in place to generate and create and manufacture that water, we will be killing two birds with one stone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. We now move to the next question, and Mr. Banks, we'll start with you. Let me read the question. Our membership is concerned with the low productivity among the workforce. They point to interference from elected officials whenever there is a labor issue in the workplace. The proposed new labor code seeks to remove political interference from the workplace and allow all work-related issues to be handled by an administrative process. Do you agree with this assessment? And if so, do you support these provisions in the draft labor code?
The issue of fair day's work for fair day's pay is something that I've spoken about for many, many years as an important aspect of economic growth and prosperity. We cannot develop effectively if we don't have good productivity. And people have got to recognize the relationship between the work they do and the work they produce and the success of the businesses that they are part of. Whether it is the business that belongs to an international corporation or a private local business in Angola. People have to recognize that they have to work so that when they make those, when they produce, the companies that they represent can have long-standing profits and benefits so that they can be paid. The labor code began in 2007, the discussion of the labor code. We are 9 years down the road, and I think that it's time enough that we should pay serious attention to putting that in place so that the political aspect of it could be taken out of the equation, and this is what you're suggesting. I agree totally that there should not be too much political intervention in labor issues because it gives the opportunity for politicians to micromanage private companies and investments that take place in Angola. But government must create the policy, and that policy must be implemented through legislation that is clear and lucid to the companies and the individuals that are involved. Workers must recognize what their rights are, but they also must understand what their wrongs are. And it's important that that takes place if we're going to have a productive society.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. Mr. Warner?
Thank you. I also support the removal of political interference from the labor system, and I would like to see the new labor code introduced because over the years we have had too many xenophobic politicians. I think that it had gotten real bad, and what we need, as Mr. Banks said, because we agree on that one, definitely not on the energy issue, is that the policy needs to be fair and balanced. It needs to be transparent. And that again has been a failure of our politicians over the years. We cannot have a situation where we are totally biased to the worker or biased against the employer. It has to be balanced. And this is something that Angola has not moved forward on at all. And the new labor policy, I'm sure, will address that issue in a meaningful manner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. Ms. Webster?
I also agree that we need a situation in Anguilla that protects our people. We need a situation, we need laws that protect our people. I think it's really sad that after 30 years of the late teacher Albina and Idalia Gums crafting and looking out so much for our people, putting in place laws impacting change of ownership with a view to protecting our people, that we could be in a place today where we have no protections. It's really, really sad. And I think it starts with caring about our people. But equally, it's a balance that needs to be struck. It's a balance because no investor is going to come in if there's a risk. Not a good investor. No good investor is going to come in if there's a risk that government's going to interfere in its business arrangements. It'll be less attractive. So what we need is legislation that is so clear, so absolutely protective of employees that there can be no discussion or no ambivalence in terms of what's the right thing to do. And certainly we need our politicians to be kept out of private sector affairs because they don't have the right values, and more often than not, it leads to a hostile environment where all our people will suffer. So yes, we need leaders, we need politicians who know what their job is. We need a politician that goes into the House of Assembly and puts the law on the books that gives our people severance, that gives them pensions, that gives them rights where there's a change of ownership and such things. That's what we need.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webster. As was stated in the beginning, please hold your applause until the end so that the other persons who have to speak, that they may get the time to compose their thoughts. Thank you. Mr. Hodge, would you like me to repeat the question for you? Our membership is concerned with the low productivity among the workforce. They point to interference from elected officials whenever there is a labor issue in the workplace. The proposed new labor code seeks to remove political interference from the workplace and allow all work-related issues to be handled by an administrative process. Do you agree with this assessment? And if so, do you support these provisions in the draft labor code?
The whole issue of staff and management relations is an issue that is challenging for companies worldwide. And what is important is to try to have a working relationship between management, staff, and of course government, meaning the Labor Department. I think it's important that there is clarity around the expectations that an employer has with their employees, and there's clarity around the relationship between the Labor Department and the employee, and the Labor Department and the employer. Clarity, so there's no misunderstanding. I think an employer is likely to get good productivity from an employee when there's openness and there's a good working relationship and there's understanding. Absolutely critical. But one of the things that we have got to address in Anguilla is the whole issue of training. Training is absolutely critical. Another thing that is important is benchmarking. What constitutes a fair working day? And how do we measure that? We got to be able to measure that so we know, an employee can know when they're performing at an acceptable level. An employer can know when an employee is performing at an acceptable level. So we try to remove as much subjectivity from the process. And yes, I like the idea of employee getting benefits. But what is probably even more important is that the employees have jobs year-round, working full-time year-round. It is very difficult for an employer to pay out certain benefits to staff if the place can only afford them 1 or 2 days of work per week. So what we've got to do is to create an environment where there is activity so that the employer's business can thrive, and that there is a harmonious working relationship between employer, employee, and the relationship with the Labor Department.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. We now move to the final question in this segment. And we're going to start with you, Mr. Hodge, so please listen carefully.
Do these other folks ever get to start?
Okay, we can start with Ms. Webster. Thank you, sir. Okay, Ms. Webster. The draft labor code, among other things, proposes minimum wage and severance pay provisions. If enacted into law, these two mandates will further increase the cost of doing business and thereby putting more pressure on an already underperforming economy. 1. Do you support these mandates, and have you considered the impact they will have on the economy? 2. If you don't agree with the labor code, what proposal would you enact to address minimum wage and severance pay concerns?
Mr. Moderator, thank you very much. It is, thank you. It is certainly important. I think that the quality of life issues that Anguillan employees currently face, it is really, really important that there is a living wage, that there is a fair day. Our environment is extremely challenging, and after so many years, it's sad to see the little money that our people are going home with. I absolutely think we've got to provide for them to have a decent wage. Now, what I think is important in addressing these issues, it's the first thing is to absolutely focus on productivity and making it attractive. I know that as a small business person myself, I know how challenging it is to think, oh my goodness, we're going to be adding just another expense to our accounting. But in fact, I see that there's great opportunity. Even with that fixed commitment to employees, I see that there's great opportunity to introduce productivity measures that will allow people to take pride in their work, pride in their, in taking home a dignified wage. That's going to translate into good business. I believe in fostering a cultural shift that will allow that to happen at the same time. So yes, I believe that we need to look at that. In terms of severance pay, it goes without saying. Again, as a small employer, and I know a lot of our young business people will also look at that as a challenge. But as an alternative to a stabilization levy where there is no merit in it at all, severance pay helps to build a harmonious relationship, but it also commits an employee to a longer term. It's more equitable and it leads to better relationships. I absolutely support it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webster. Mr. Warner?
Thank you. I wholeheartedly support severance pay. After hearing some of the things that has gone on recently by some of our major hotels, etc., I think it will almost be criminal for someone not to support severance pay. I also support the minimum wage. However, I see minimum wage can also be a double-edged sword, because you're going to have employers who can't afford to pay whatever the increased minimum wage is, but you're also going to have some who will pay just that and feel that they are meeting the bare basics, and that can be a major problem. So the same energy that we put into severance and put into a minimum wage, we also have to put into such things as curbing inflation. We have to, as I said before, and I can't say it often enough, we have to reduce the cost of living. We can sit here and talk all we want about productivity and making it harmonious and whatever between the worker, but when you have a situation where the average single mother is forced to work 2 jobs and still can't make ends meet, sometimes 3 jobs and can't make ends meet, do you really expect her to be productive on job number 1 when she's trying to save the energy she don't have for job number 2 or job number 3? We have to get around that. And these are the problems that we face. So it is, to sit down and just say, we need a minimum wage, we need severance pay, that is not going to the root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem is that what Anguillians are presently working for, with the high cost of living, they can't make ends meet. They can't afford to buy food, they can't afford electricity. I mean, after all, if in 2015, we have almost 500 houses and no one is counting that can't afford electricity, you have 200 families every 2 weeks that is working on the food, that is surviving off the food bank. You know things are bad, okay? So these are the problems we have, and we are not going to be able to increase productivity or change the attitude because the hungry people are really just hearing their bellies bawling.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. Mr. Banks?
Can you repeat the question, please?
The draft labor code, among other things, proposes minimum wage and severance pay provisions. If enacted into law, These two mandates will further increase the cost of doing business and thereby putting more pressure on an already underperforming economy. 1. Do you support these mandates and have you considered the impact that they will have on the economy? And 2. If you don't agree with the labor code, what proposal would you enact to address minimum wage and severance pay concerns?
The minimum wage must be fair and balanced. It must take into account the situation in the overall economy. It must take into account the fact that people need to have a living wage that they can afford the important necessities of life. So consequently, it has to be a relationship between what the economy can afford to withstand as well as what the worker requires for normal living. So there must be a balance. There are some people who believe that by having a minimum wage at a certain level, it increases their salaries. It does not necessarily follow. It just simply means that the minimum that somebody can pay a worker is set at X. If you're working for X plus Y, you will not be affected necessarily. There may be some consequential increases as a result of that. And this is where the inflation takes place within the overall cost of doing business, the increases in cost of doing business. So it's got to be fair and balanced. It must be done very professionally, analytically, and it's a task that cannot be done by plucking a number out of the air. So it takes a process, and I hope that we're all willing, the labor unions, the Chamber of Commerce are all willing to get involved in an exercise such as this. As far as severance pay is concerned, that is critical. Because of the nature of this economy, the fact that when somebody loses a job, they lose a job. You don't have the social safety nets to support people who have lost a job. When you lost a job, you lost a job. So we either need to be working towards creating those social safety nets as a minimum, but certainly when businesses employ people for an extended period of time, there must be something that kicks in within the labor code that ensures that somebody who's working for an extended period of time has some benefit if that company decides to get rid of them or that company tries to change hands. This has got to be institutionalized within the labor code and done in a manner that is affordable, done in a manner that is fair, both to the business and to the worker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. Mr. Hodge?
Yes, I think that this particular subject is a tough subject in that we've got to protect the rights of every citizen of this country to put them in the best possible position to have a quality of life where they can at least be comfortable. This comes at a huge expense. One of the things that we have got to do in Anguilla, and it is government's role, to create an enabling environment for opportunities for employment where people can move from a job that will pay $5 an hour, and by having new sets of skills, you can move to a job that can pay you $7, $8, $10, $12, $15 an hour. The challenge that we have, and we've got to be very realistic on this table up here, there are some jobs, unfortunately, which are by nature very low-paying jobs everywhere in the world. But yes, we need to ensure that people can live at a certain level. What we've got to do, and we've got to do this actively, create opportunities for people to get jobs that will pay much better. And we of the Dove Party, we have that kind of thing in mind. To give an example, we would like to attract active retired people to live in Anguilla. And that in and of itself will create jobs which are better paying and with greater stability. We also want to attract people who need assisted care. This is a program that is rolled out across Europe and is doing quite well in the United States. That is where someone might need some assistance. They are not that sick where they need to be hospitalized, but they're not that well where they can live alone. So some insurance companies will pay $10, $12, $15, up to $20 an hour to have these people looked after. And those are the kinds of jobs that we want to start moving our low-end workers into. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. That's the end of the economics section. We're now going to move into governance. And as was mentioned at the very beginning, I am seeing the questions for the first time, just like yourselves. This one seems to be stuck with great glue. Okay, here we go. Governance/elections. There have been ongoing discussions for 20 years that the electoral districts need to be changed to bring balance and better representation to the people of Anguilla. Do you support any change? If so, what specific changes would you make? The question, we're going to start with Mr. Warner. Let me repeat the question for you, sir. There have been ongoing discussions for 20 years that the electoral districts need to be changed to bring balance and better representation to the people of Anguilla. Do you support any change? If so, what specific changes would you make?
Electoral reform is one of my platform issues. I support abolishing all the constituencies. I don't believe that the constituencies have served us well. For the most part, they have given us a number of inept leaders who's only popular in that little small area. Anguilla is a small island. We are small enough that we can elect our 7 best leaders. If we want to go a step further and say it's 9, that we get rid of the ex officio members, that's okay. But I am saying that we need to move to a system where we elect our leaders island-wide. And each Anguillian gets the opportunity to vote if it's 7 or 9 times, and you pick who you want to be your 7 or your 9 leaders. Until we change the way that we elect our leaders, we are not going to change the political system. Because right now, one of the problems that you are seeing in this election is people who feel that they have the means and they're going to buy votes. You know, corruption is becoming a problem. You hear of, you know, bicycles and this and that being given out. In the past, it used to be sand and $5. You know, this can only happen on a constituency level. So if someone wants to go to win an election by bribing, go ahead, bribe the entire island. We have to change the system because the present system has gotten us to where we are, and 2015 is going to be the most critical election that Anguilla has had, and it is also a very scary election when you look at the platforms and when you look at the number of awful candidates that we have contested.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. Again, members of the floor, let me remind you of what was stated already. Thank you very much. We now move to Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I actually believe in a hybrid of the two. I believe that the constituency electoral system makes provision for people in several districts to have somebody to go to, a representative to go to ensure that their interests in that particular area are taken care of. But as well, you need persons who run the island-wide, who have an opportunity to look at the national issues more directly for the election. So if you have simply a system based on constituencies and districts, you can get the kind of situation to which Mr. Warner referred. So, but you cannot afford to neglect them in a system that operates with totally island-wide representation. So if you have a part of the parliament elected on the constituency level, you can have a part of the parliament elected island-wide. And those persons who are elected on that basis have got to do the things of a national nature that are so important for our national development. So I'm suggesting that in electoral reform, there should be a hybrid of the two. As happens in the British Virgin Islands.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. We now move to Mr. Hodge.
For most part, I agree with what Mr. Banks has said. I think the hybrid system is a good system. But I think we might want to go a step further, and that the idea of having an upper house and a lower house seemed to make a lot of sense, in that you might have a situation where you can elect the executive island-wide, and you have the lower house that forms part of your legislature. That actually, so the executive and the legislature come together to form the actual House of Assembly, so to speak, so that you have better broad-based representation. It's a similar system to what happens in the United States, where you have senators, and then you have the congressman. Similar type of system, and that way it makes for a more effective legislature, and where the Congress folks have some veto power. Because at the present time, what happens in Angola is that the executive dominates the legislature, and the legislature is benign. Because whatever decision the executive makes, essentially is just a rubber stamp of the legislature, because of the makeup of the current elected officials.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. Ms. Webster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I believe that the electoral districts, as they are, is symptomatic of what I believe our electoral system is very archaic and not serving us well at all. So yes, I think that we need to look at electoral reform in a broad way rather than just make changes in an ad hoc way. I think that those ad hoc changes would not yield the outcome that the Angola people deserve. However, I believe that Anguillians need to be consulted, they need to be very much participating in the process, and I know that many years ago we looked at a hybrid system, and since then Tortola has absolutely implemented. But I see also an opportunity, so I think that's a good system, and I'm sure if the Angola people consider it, they might also consider at the same time the opportunity to look at, say, what Belize has done. In Belize, it's possible to make appointments. Their constitution provides for a man of religion, person of religion, to be one of the members. It provides for, other very specific disciplines to be included in the process. I think that there's an opportunity for that. What I think is really critical in Angola right now, and it points to how archaic our system is, we need fixed state elections. We need fixed terms. We shouldn't have representatives there for more than 2 terms. We need, to make it possible for all Anguillians to be represented properly in the House of Assembly and in government. So yes, electoral reform is necessary, and I don't agree that we should just do an ad hoc placement of different boundaries.
Thank you very much. We now move on to question 2, and we're going to start with Mr. Banks, so please listen carefully. Increasingly, the government is assigning functions formerly administered by government to statutory bodies, which now have responsibility for significant budgets and policy implementation. Given these responsibilities, questions have been raised about appointments to these boards and whether the increased cost of these bodies can be justified. 1. Do you agree that appointments should be merit-based? And 2, what would you do to ensure greater accountability from these boards?
First of all, I agree totally that appointments should be merit-based. Certain qualifications and requirements should be set for all persons who sit on boards, and the particular statutory body, the particular agency, should have those requirements and qualifications enshrined in their laws, in their operating administrative laws, policies. It is important that when we select persons for boards, that they can do what is required of them. And that is, if it's, for example, a board that has to do with the financial issues, they must be able to understand how to handle and deal with those monetary issues. If it's a board that has to do with issues relating to water, electricity, you should have representatives from all kinds of parts of the island society who can address those issues. Now, you don't have to be an expert on water, but you need to be an expert in some field, which is a pre-requirement for dealing with some of the issues that come up on that particular statutory body. And I think that there should be a director's examination for all those persons who sit on the board, so that they can have the very basics of understanding of what their responsibilities are. People believe that they can sit on boards and make decisions, and those decisions don't affect them. Those decisions, in some cases, they should need to be held directly responsible for, in a way. So it's important that those things are put in place. I can't remember the other part of your question.
The second part being, what would you do to ensure greater accountability from these boards?
Well, if you put in place a system where people are held responsible, I think that will ensure that they pay serious attention to the things that they do. And you must also put in place an oversight audit. There must be regular audits of what takes place in the board, so that you can have an idea what's happening, and that you don't trust only the reports that come out of those boards as to what they're doing. And make them accountable to either the government or the agencies, the directorship of the agencies that they're involved in.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hodge?
Yes, I think that the appointment to boards is absolutely necessary, that they're done on a merit basis. Quite frankly, my view is that we need to determine what skill sets we need that constitute the board. In other words, you might need to have some legal advice, marketing advice, salespeople, some accounting skills, etc., etc. So you make your appointment based on the skill sets that you need to have that constitute the board. So when that board comes together, you have a representation from a wide array of skills, so that when issues are dealt with, they're looked at from various perspectives. And I think there must be a mechanism where there's some interim feedback that will go to the functional ministry responsible, so that on a timely basis, that ministry is kept abreast via some formal presentation of sort that's made by the board or a subset of the board as to the functioning of the activities of the board. And these boards must be held accountable and should have very clear and well-defined scope within which they operate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. Ms. Webster?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm going to ask you to read the question again. Thank you.
Increasingly, the government is assigning functions formerly administered by the government to statutory bodies, which now have responsibilities for significant budgets and policy implementation. Given these responsibilities, questions have been raised about appointments to these boards and whether the increased costs of these bodies can be justified. 1, do you agree that appointments should be merit-based? And 2, what would you do to ensure greater accountability from these boards?
Thank you very much, Mr. Rock, moderator. What I will say is that I absolutely think that one of the challenges we face in Anguilla is the proliferation of boards of almost every function that was formerly our administration took responsibility for in the past, and when we had less cost and a better economy. So absolutely, I'm going to look at it differently. I'm not going to assume because boards are there that they really serve Anguilla or the functions well at all. I will look at it with a view to cost saving. We talked earlier about 25 million. I think just in terms of the boards that operate, we can secure much more savings if we look at it critically. That's the place I would start. And yes, there is a place for some boards. It's very, very important. And And those boards, it has to be on the basis of merit, but just not merit, not passing the obstacle of, you know, a politician thinking I can make a recommendation because that person strikes me as being an expert in law, for instance. No, I think there needs to be an independent intermediary before you can secure those appointments, because they run the risk, as they do now, to really be an extension of the political arm and the parties and their vested interests at the cost of the ordinary Anguillian person, and I don't support that. In terms of if we achieve, the second part of the question, if we're going to achieve merit-based decisions and competent boards, then corporate governance at, you know, international levels, we have very clear best practice guidelines, and I believe those should be the standards, because we have to align the operation of the boards with not just international standards, but the highest levels of productivity, so that ultimate services that are delivered benefit Anguillians and also distinguish us in the world. So high levels of corporate governance. I think that we need to have access to independent metrics, you know, yes, auditors, but also other standards authorities, so that we can make sure that we're getting good value for our investment.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webster. Mr. Warner?
Thank you. In regard to the number of boards around Anguilla, if I can say it rather lightly, I think we are overboard. We are overboarded. Okay? What the politicians have done over the years is increase bureaucracy. And one of the reasons why they have done that is because nobody wants to offend anybody and everybody wants to find a job for their friend. Okay? We have, you would have heard it just a while ago when everybody is saying, oh, we don't need radical change. Let's just keep a little bit of both. So we're going to keep a little bit of both in the house. But if you look at it this way, for the salaries that we are paying in the house, then keeping a little bit of both is also making it doubly expensive. We need to just change the system. In relation to the boards, what we have now is that if you look at the various, and we call them authorities, is that you are taxed by the authority and you are taxed by the government. So you go to the hospital, you are paying full fees for your medical expenses. But they're also taking up probably 15-20% of the budget, so you are taxed to pay for that household. And you wonder, are you getting any value for your money? You go to the ports, the same thing is happening. And sometimes the fees is ad hoc. 1 week you go down, the amount is in US. Then the next week you go down, oh, that was too expensive because it hit somebody who never expect to be hit, so now it's easy. You know, those are things that we have to change. All the boards have done is given us an opportunity to provide greater political patronage. And you look at the boards now, you will see some of the most inner people that have been selected by the politicians to sit on those boards. And the problem we have in Anguilla is that, yes, there might be a shortage of skilled, trained professionals, but that has also come about because over the last 20 years, we have done a very poor job of training Anguillians for the relevant jobs. So you're going to have a situation where even if there is a change tomorrow, all you're going to see is zombies of the past coming up through the cracks and taking over the boards again. It's a ridiculous system.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. The next question will be given to Mr. Hodge, and it reads, anachronism of allowing the incumbent government to set the election date at a time of its choosing has resulted in issues with the voters list, in that the final list will not be available until 2 days before election date. Do you agree that changes should be made to this system? If so, what specific proposals will you seek to have enacted by your government? If so, what specific proposals will you seek to have enacted by your government?
Can you repeat the question?
Okay. The anachronism of allowing the incumbent government to set the election date at a time of its choosing has resulted in issues with the voters list, in that the final list will not be available until 2 days before election date. Do you agree that changes should be made to this system? If so, what specific proposals will you seek to have enacted by your government?
Yeah, I think there's some issues there. I think, as Ms. Webster indicated, it is important that the election date be a known date to all of us. So it is not a decision that is made by the government in power. With respect to the voters list, there is a need to ensure that there is some quality associated with the entire process. And it is very concerning and disturbing that Angola has a population of about 13,500 people, and we have over 11,000 registered voters. Clearly, something there needs to be analyzed. And one of the things that they will say to you at the registration office is that the onus is on citizens or candidates to question any name on that list that they're concerned about. Unfortunately, you don't have the benefit of a lot of specific data on that person, and they have it. So there is a need for some quality checks to be done, because what we're doing is we are eroding our democracy. Our democracy is under threat because of the abuse that is going on, whether it is happening deliberately or it's happening by accident. But certainly I have little or no confidence in the voters list that we are going to be using for this upcoming election, and that is disturbing. It's very disturbing, and you as citizens of Angola ought to be as concerned as I am, because what we are likely to see is a situation where decisions are made for you and for me by people who are unknown to us. And in some cases, some of these people are likely to just get on the next plane out of here. You don't know them, I don't know them. They will probably they've never been to Angola, and they're out of here, and there is an abuse of the Constitution, because it is not in accordance with the requirements under the Constitution or the Elections Act.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. Ms. Webster?
Mr. Moderator, I agree that we need fixed date elections. I think that it's an important underpin of any democratic system. And I think by looking at that initially, we could avoid a lot of the challenges that we're addressing now. If we had fixed date elections, objections could be at a much more comfortable time. There'd be opportunity to really know, how the community is comprised. The whole issue of, whether or not the overseas voter is, entitled to participate, there's I think, differences in the interpretation of, who's entitled to vote. But that's something that has to be taken up at the court level. I think that at the moment, our system is what it is. We've inherited it. I think that when we say we want population growth, and we say that it's really important, I think that it's important to include all our people, even if that does not, fit conveniently into, getting elected. For instance, in the last election, the overseas voter made a difference to me. I chose not to object to it. And it was very sad for me, having made incredible efforts to reach that overseas voter, to find that those names had been removed by the person, effectively by the person who put them there, because support had shifted. These are the kinds of unfair things that happen, by virtue of, that can't be investigated because we don't have a fixed date and such like. But ultimately, we want to include our people, and we must make sure that our Constitution reflects a focus on including everyone, all Anguillians. I believe that strongly.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webster. Mr. Warner?
Thank you. The problem we have is that the system that we currently operate under is broken. And we're making a number of suggestions here at the table, but those are only patches. I would like to see a fixed date because I believe that this time around, the election was stretched out just from desperation. But that's a whole other story. But at the end of the day, fixed dates tend to work best under a presidential system and not under the first past the post system that we operate that can become rather fluid. We need to radically change the way that we are electing our leaders. And what Haj and Pam say about overseas voters, that is something that needs to be addressed. We need to probably say, should they be voting by proxy rather than having to travel? Because it concerns me that in this recession and after 5 years of hard times, that we can have political parties that are able to afford to import voters. I'm wondering, where's the money coming from? Is this part of the corrupt process that we have? Those are things that concerns me. So we need to radically change the system, not fix it. It's broken, so let us get a new system in place and one that can effectively solve Anguillians, because what we need is increased democracy, not democracy that we can corner in a way to benefit certain groups or certain interests of certain people. All Anguillians must benefit from any changes that we make to the system.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. Mr. Banks?
Can you repeat the question, please? The last part of it.
Do you agree that changes should be made to this system? If so, what specific proposals will you seek to have enacted by your government?
No, just before that, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The specific question that you asked, not from the top. Because we're talking about voters and we're talking about absentee ballots and so forth, but I don't think that was the question that you raised.
Okay, let me read the question. The anachronism of allowing the incumbent government to set the election date at a time of its choosing has resulted in issues with the voters list, in that the final list will not be available until 2 days before the election date. Do you agree that changes should be made to this system? If so, what specific proposals will you seek to have enacted by your government?
Well, I think that I agree with Mr. Warner that there should be a general overhaul of the system to begin with. First of all, if we have a fixed election date, it creates issues with the system that we now have. Because what happens when a government falls? Then you will have a situation where you have to call the election in short order. What has happened in this period is the fact that we extended the period of election, and also I think the laws regarding objections were misinterpreted, so there needs to be more clarity on that. Objections will only obtain to the quarterly list rather than the preliminary list, and there is a time for that, especially before elections. So I think that we need to have a general overhaul of the system. I'm not sure whether it is important to have a fixed date for elections, but I think that there should be some general idea, some announcement way ahead when the government in office intends to have elections. Because in our system as it exists now, it requires that you have a maximum term of 5 years, but you can call elections within 1 year. So if that facility, if that provision still remains, you will have the same problem that we're dealing with right now. So I agree with Mr. Moore, there should be a complete overhaul of the system, and we need to have electoral reform, which includes all aspects of the electoral process, including a fixed date for elections.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. We are going to change the pace some, and we're going to move to the economy. So we're going to start with Ms. Webster. The question reads, the situation regarding our two indigenous banks is now a popular discussion topic. Given that every banking crisis in the world required some form of governmental intervention, would your government consider, one, intervening to resolve the situation, and two, if so, what form do you envision the intervention taking?
Very interesting question, and I'm grateful for it, Mr. Moderator. I absolutely believe that the indigenous banks are so critical to our opportunities in the future that we need to take an active role and to intervene. We've seen large countries do it, and I think that it's important for us to build a case to rescue the banks for our people. I absolutely believe that. I've seen Ireland step in a creative way. In fact, I met with the Prime Minister of Ireland a few years ago when they were in the midst of dealing with their similar challenges. And they stepped, Ireland dealt with it in a certain way. I've seen what's happened in other countries as well. I think that we need to work with the British government and the other international countries, who are interested not just in the immediate crisis, the immediate financial crisis, but who really are connected with us and supporting us in terms of, what a small island economy really involves and what it entails and what community banking is all about in terms of the social development framework. So I think that our government should step in, absolutely rescue the banks, and I think that we could look to external nations who are connected and aligned with us in terms of our vision for the future for Anguilla to do that. I think that would present a ready opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webster. Mr. Warner?
I am no banking expert and I won't pretend to be, but looking at the banking crisis that has gone on for the last year, almost 2 years, this banking crisis is homemade, and we have to blame ourselves in Anguilla for it from a number of perspectives. One, our government surrendered the banks in a manner that it should not. Our government destabilized the banks in a way that it should not have. And we also had a situation where the public lost confidence in the directors of the bank, and rather than fixing that problem, we just felt it best to just surrender our banks. My feeling is that the banks are Anguillan. They were built by Anguilla. They are, something that we was proud of, and those banks should remain Anguillan, and we must fight tooth and nail to ensure that those banks remain Anguillan. If, however, we get them back from the ECCB, they need to become Anguillan banks once again. However, when we get them back, we also have to have some kind of public integrity legislation passed, because corporate governance is of essence here. Because if we never had that problem with corporate governance, we might not have had some of the issues that we have. But the banks are also linked to the greater economy. And part of the problem that the banks have with the unperforming loans is a direct result of what is happening within the Anguillan economy at this time. And the same government that surrendered the banks is the same government that has done nothing over the years to grow the economy. So this is the nature of the problem that we have. And we can beat around however we want to beat around it, but that is the nature of the problem. But the ECCB have to bring out their report, and the banks have to become Anguillan once again. Anything less than that, I will not be happy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. Mr. Banks?
I agree that there must be some government intervention. That intervention should have taken place a little while ago. And that intervention should come in terms of really understanding what the problem is with the banks. I think that when the government of Anguilla, as a member of the Monetary Council, decided that the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank should intervene in Anguilla, I don't think they understood the problem of the banks. It could have been that there was need for them to pay more attention to the best way to achieving a turnaround in the banking situation in Angola. The indigenous banks are critical to development. They have been historically. They have created wealth for the people of Angola. They created businesses. They created opportunities to improve themselves in education and training. They have been able to meet their needs on an urgent basis for medical reasons, a whole host of things. Angola has been better for the indigenous banks. Another aspect of it is the fact that they are owned by 3,500 Angolans. And a number of those Angolan owners are also customers. So you have a situation where they're not only stakeholders, but they're customers as well. And it's important that the government of Angola, when it intervened in this bank, looked at the economic situation in Angola, understand that people, especially non-performing loans, people are willing to pay the loans if they have the wherewithal to do it. It came in a period of challenge, and I think the people of Angola needed to have an opportunity with government intervention to create more economic activity so that they can really look at the responsibilities, the commitments of the bank, and be able to address them. You can only address your obligations to the bank if you have a job that is paying sufficient to meet your requirements, and you have businesses that are operating. So I think that there's a lack of information based on this intervention, which we must look at, and the government has got to intervene at this point to give some leadership as to where we're going to the people, leadership and information as to where we're going and what. And also, because we have 3,500 shareholders in some of these banks, make sure that the people are involved in the solution. Because as Mr. Warner said, there can be no acceptable solution without the involvement of Angolans in the indigenous banks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. Mr. Hodge?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. The issue with our indigenous banks is a major challenge for all of us. When the central bank first intervened, they said that they would give us some feedback in the first 6 months. They took another extension, and I think we're now looking at year plus. And I think it is disrespectful, quite frankly, that whatever is going on, they did not find it important to respect the people of Angola, who are shareholders, to respect depositors in this country, to respect our government. There is a clear lack of information. And without information, it is difficult to say exactly how things should move forward. What I think is incumbent on the government is to apply pressure on the central bank to be forthcoming with information. And after receiving that information, then the government would be in a much better position to decide a way forward. I would, however, say that any solution that does not involve us getting back our community banks would be unacceptable. Unacceptable. And if we get those banks back, or when we get those banks back, it is critical that we bring about much reform in terms of the way we conduct ourselves. Clearly, there's been an issue of a lack of oversight on the part of the central bank in terms of how closely they were monitoring what was going on to allow a situation to degrade to the point where they found it necessary to move in. But equally as important, we have got to address the issue of getting the economy in Angola functioning and ensure that we have a diversified economy that works for the benefit of all the people of Angola.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. We will now move to another question, and Mr. Warner, you'll be first at bat. The question reads, Capjaluca is currently operating without an alien landholding license. An MOU is in breach of its lease and owes the government substantial amounts of money. Sadly, this is not a new problem, as it has extended over successive governments. What will your government do to, one, fix the problems, and two, ensure that the owners of this resort live up to their obligations to the government?
Capjaluca is probably the biggest mess that we have in Anguilla right now. It's not only operating, as far as I know right now, without an alien landholding license or with a fractured MOU. As far as I know, they even don't have a general manager. And we even can't fix that because we have a situation, I understand, of rotating managers that is coming in that even our labor department can't seem to catch walking, you know, and it makes no sense. I don't know if I have the legal fix for Capjaluca. It's an issue that has been going on in the court for so many years, and I am not sure after the behavior and the interventions of this present government that it is a good idea for government to get that actively involved. But any government that have Anguilla at heart must ensure that Capjaluca is fully functional, that the hotel is making an economic contribution to Anguilla, that the majority of Anguillians that can be employed is employed. It sits on prime real estate. You know, these are factors that we have to address. I have not been deeply involved with all that is going on at Capjaluca, and that is mainly because I think it is such a mess that the government has more or less created, you know. And we picking sides with which investor we like, and then when the investor don't do exactly what we want, we don't like that investor anymore. This is the nature of the politics in Anguilla, and this is something that we have to change about the way that we conduct business in Anguilla from the political angle, right? So Capjaluca, I personally don't have the answers, but I know that Capjaluca can make a valuable contribution to Anguilla as it has done in the past if we sort out the legal issues that we have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. Mr. Banks?
Capjaluca continues to function as a property in Anguilla and is addressing the needs of visitors arriving in Anguilla at this time. The government claims that it does not have an alien landholding license. And there are ways to deal with this issue. This has been going on for 2 years, 2.5 years. But we have not seen any initiative coming from the government to resolving that issue. We hear what the Capjaluca owing the government are receiving up to $6 million in checks from Capjaluca because they claim it is operating illegally. Now, Capjaluca has been a challenge for most governments over the years, but on every count, there have been solutions that have been brought to the issue, and it was the court system that resulted in some of the problems that we have faced. The matter that the owners were always in dispute. The matter was always in court. One day there's a ruling in favor of one ownership, one group of owners, and the other day there's a ruling in favor of the others. So it has always been a mess, but it has never been a situation where we have had Capjaluca operating based on what the government is saying without a license for 2 years. Does it mean that Capjaluca is doing this in defiance of the government, or does it mean the government is not doing anything to impose whatever is required by the law if a company is operating illegally? So it puzzles me, and I think that any government getting into office must look at the problem and fix it. You cannot have the situation that exists at Capjaluca today. 25% of the rooms are closed down because of this dispute. And we know that based on our legislation, based on our policy, you cannot have properties on the beach being closed down and not being utilized. So we have on the one hand, one group operating without a license. We have on the other hand, one group with the ownership closing down their villas so that Anguillians are not getting the opportunity to work, and the viability of the property is in jeopardy. So it's a serious problem, and it goes right back to the fact that we need to be proactive in doing things. We can't afford to blame this person, run to the governor with marches and a whole bunch of things. We need to deal with the problem analytically and properly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. Mr. Hodge.
I think I'm going to need to have that question repeated. It's been such a long time since I got it.
Cap Juluca is currently operating without an alien landholding license. An MOU is in breach of its lease and it owes the government substantial amounts of money. Sadly, this is not a new problem as it extends over successive governments. What will your government do to, 1, fix the problems, and 2, to ensure that the owners of this resort live up to their obligations to the government?
The situation at Cap Juluca, when I think about Cap Juluca, I say, oh my goodness, what a web we have woven. This includes the government and all the players. I happen to have been a bit involved in the process some years ago, trying to mediate a way forward, because most of you will recall that the Chief Minister was about to compulsory acquire that property. And it was our view that if that property was compulsory acquired, that it would have rendered a lot of people on this island unemployed and without income, both folks who are working there directly and those who are dependent on Cap Juluca indirectly. And to our mind, this was not a good situation. And we opted to mediate, not find a solution, but trying to bring the parties together so they can put their heads together to see if there was a way forward. We managed to achieve our primary objective, and that primary objective was to keep Cap Juluca open as a going concern. Unfortunately and regrettably, this is so with some 27 rooms that's not available as part of the pool. I think both the Anguilla United Front and the Anguilla United Movement, they have both got to accept fault for where things are. One allowed fractional ownership of the property. The other one signed a sale agreement that allowed for fractional ownership. Unfortunately, I saw the document. It's a tall document, and it was not read. And there were some conditions in that agreement which were just unreasonable to be accepted by the principal owner of Cap Juluca. And that property has been in dispute for many years, as we know. And the way forward, unfortunately, is a situation that is, for most part, is going to be legal and it's going to be bloody. And I hope that the government's face does not get bloody in the process. But it's going to be bloody, unfortunately, I think, before we find a solution for this property. But with respect to them operating without a license, I think that the current government is playing a game with that, because they have every right to be operating that property as a going concern, the principal owners at the moment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. Ms. Webster.
I believe firmly that the Cap Juluca situation as it exists today is the perfect example of where governments not recognizing what their responsibilities are in relation to investors and what their responsibilities are in relation to their people, where they get them all mixed up, and you end up with a mess like the others have described. Cap Juluca is the perfect example. How do you fix the problem? I think that you fix the problem by focusing on what's really important. And what's really important is that we provide reliable employment for our people, that we secure our tourism, make sure that our visitors are coming back to Anguilla, and that investors, good investors, that they operate in an environment that is certain. I think a lawyer in government could have avoided would have had many different opportunities over the last several years to make a difference. Even external advice from lawyers not involved in the matter. If government had taken an approach where they sought expert resolution of it, would have avoided the problems. What's needed now is really to compartmentalize those objectives and decide what the priority is. I think it's really important that our people are assured of employment. I think that it would be terrible for the government and for Anguilla internationally if we were going to step in and compulsorily acquire the property. But I think there are a lot of risky decisions that government could take right now. In fact, acting on their interpretation of the current MMU and working to assure and implementing a course of action that's decisive. It might be challenged ultimately in court. The saga between the owners has gone on for years and years and years, upwards of a decade. But I think government needs to take a decision, take action, and make sure that their people's jobs are protected and that we don't suffer a big harm in terms of our perception internationally as a market for good investment. And I think there are not many decisions that will be challenged ultimately down the line if we take it with that focus.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webster. I'm fully cognizant that we are almost very tight on time, so we're going to move on to the next question. There is a segment of questions which must be asked, so we're going to make this one the last in the economics section, the economy section. So listen carefully. We're going to start with Mr. Banks. The question reads, most economic experts agree that investing in education is critical to developing the workforce needed to sustain economic growth. Singapore is touted as such an example, as investments made in the 1950s positioned Singapore to become a major economic power in the 1980s. Are we making the types of investments in educating our population that will create a workforce that can attract business to Anguilla?
I think that you can't spend enough money in education and training. So if I were to answer the question, I'd say that we're not spending enough money in training and education. We could always spend more. I think we were on track 10 years ago in putting a lot of money into education and training. I think that we put in place not only training programs, but we also put in place initiatives like the Anguilla Community College, because we recognize that at some point it would be important to have more affordable training closer at home. The UNI program, the Anguilla Community College, and so on and so forth. So we've got to continue to look at the economy, see what its needs are, and create opportunities for training in and outside of Anguilla that are accessible to Anguillians and that are provided for when they're not accessible in Anguilla overseas, in the form of scholarships and grants and so on and so forth. It's important that whatever development we have, Anguillians must be able to participate in it fully. And you can only participate in it fully when you have the adequate training. You cannot complain about the need for technical and professional persons in certain positions if you don't have them in Anguilla trained to take up those responsibilities. So my answer to that question is that we can never have enough training. We must continue to do more training to ensure that the relevant skills are available in Anguilla to take on the sectors that we are involved in. And we just got to continue to do more and more training as we go along. Simple answer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. Mr. Hodge? Yes. Most economic experts agree that investing in education is critical to developing the workforce needed to sustain economic growth. Singapore is touted as such an example, as investments made in the 1950s positioned Singapore to become a major economic power in the 1980s. Are we making the types of investments in educating our population that will create a workforce that can attract businesses to Anguilla?
Short answer is no. The longer answer speaks to the need for us to first identify what we're training people for. So it's all well and good to educate people, but people must be educated with a specific purpose in mind, meaning what industries exactly we're talking about, at what levels do we need those skill sets, and the like. I think that Singapore, when you use the example of Singapore launched out on financial services, and they found a niche opportunity that has positioned Singapore extremely well. Singapore today has the largest number per capita of millionaires in the world. And I think it was in the 1950s where a delegation from Singapore went to Jamaica to understand how to run a democracy. And today, Singapore is probably the best position, has been held out as a model of what economic transformation can look like. So as we talk about developing and training our people, we need to have an understanding as to exactly what we are training them for. One of the things, however, I think that we are badly lacking in is allowing the entrepreneurial spirit in this country to come alive. And we teach people and prepare them to work for other people. But what we need to do is to encourage a culture where there's out-of-the-box thinking, which means that people are free to think for themselves and to be creative, and out of that creative thinking, some fantastic opportunities can come about for Anguilla. And we need to recognize that the market is not limited to Anguilla anymore. All you need is one good idea here in Anguilla, and you can appeal to a market of 7 billion people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. Ms. Webster?
Yes, I absolutely believe that our investment in education is not sufficient right now. I think that before we invest, though, and spend money in, ad hoc measures, we really need not just an education plan, we need a national development plan. In fact, it was the strategic planning that Mr. Lee engaged in the 1950s. You see, he went to Jamaica to see how it worked. It was that kind of research, that kind of, setting very clear objectives in terms of national development that was important, and it allowed him to align and allow for that cultural shift that is working for them so well now. So, in terms of education, what we need is to get that national development plan, and I can say that just like international financial services is working for Singapore today, it could have worked for Anguilla, it could have actually worked for Jamaica if they had the kind of leadership and the real commitment to that outcome. So we can't just have education and just isolated actions based on the current needs of our society. We need to know what kind of society we want and what kind of society we're going to craft. For instance, when I talk to young people today, they're saying to me, we want to do things with technology. That is how we're going to transform. We want to be involved in digital media. You ask yourself the question, for programming, we're moving increasingly to a technological context where there may not even be nations. I read an article today by a really forward-thinking Indian person, and he said that in 2050, the borders that separate us nationally are not going to exist. The world's going to be just one place, and how we're going to, as a people, survive and do well We've got to imagine how we're going to get to that place, and we have to do it by programming right now, teaching our children right now the programs that are needed. That's going to help us transform to that level.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webster. Mr. Warner?
Mr. Moderator, the simple answer to your question really is no, we are not investing enough in education. And Ms. Webster is right. A national development plan is the way to go. We have to look 20 years down the road. There's no government that can educate our human resources within their 5 years' time that they spend in government. So we have to look at it in a much longer term. Right now we are spending a lot of money on education, but we are still not spending enough. And we were not on track with education 10 years ago, and we have fallen off the rails now. We have been off the rails for probably the last 20 years. We have probably lost 3 or 4 generations of Anguillians that could have passed through the school system that has not been properly educated. And if you want to look at it in a simple way, every year we graduate about 300 kids from the high school. But we brag when we can send away 50. We brag that we will open a community college for 50. But even if we open a community college for another 50, we are still losing about 200 kids through the crack every year with no technical skills or vocational skills. This is the nature of the problem. And the problem is ongoing. I remember about 10 years ago, I took pictures of the conditions of the lab in the high school. And rather than the government of the day thinking that it was an embarrassment, they sent the police to me for trespassing on the school grounds. You know, this is the problem that we have been having. And yes, I know we are spending a lot of money. It takes up probably about 20% of our budget. But it's possible travel and vehicles and the likes of a politician's salaries also takes up a significant amount. So we have to look at education. We have to change our approach to the way that we are looking at education in this country. And we also have to realize that the money we spend on the schools can't do it all. We also have to look at it in a holistic manner. What is the role that families and parenting and so on play? Because half of the money we spend is really wasted because of disruptive kids. Disruptive kids that might be hungry, because of what we discussed earlier, disruptive kids who might not have electricity in their home. So we have to look at it, and until we get that national development plan in place, we are not going anywhere.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. We are now going to move to the personal segment. This packet of questions is entitled Personal. It also states no rebuttal. There are questions that are specifically for each candidate. Again, let me repeat, it states personal and no rebuttal. Okay, so we're going to start with Mr. Banks. The question reads, Mr. Banks, you have been accused of being afraid to make decisions, that you are not decisive, and that you allow civil servants to control you. Given the urgency of action that awaits a new government, what can you tell the Anguillian people tonight to disabuse them of these impressions?
I've never heard the accusation yet. Never heard it. As a matter of fact, I'm blamed for everything. So if I'm blamed for everything, I've got to be making decisions. So I believe that the premise of that question is wrong. I've always been a person who takes decisions. I'm always the person who's involved in everything that is happening within the government that I've been a part. And I've taken initiatives that people have looked at and said to themselves, maybe this is a wrong move. At the end of the day, I've done a lot of critical things that have been over my career as a politician in Angola. I was involved very early in the institution implementation of the Social Security Fund with Honorable James Ratner Webster. I fought in the trenches with him. I took decisions in those issues. I've been to the House of Assembly for 28 years. And in the House of Assembly, I've gotten up on points of issue within the governments that I've been a part, as well as in opposition. And in 1995, the National Rehabilitation Effort, I was the leader in that. I've been the leader in a number of other initiatives here in Angola, and I have no reason to accept the premise of your statement. Nobody has ever said that to me. Right now, I'm out of government for 5 years, and my name is heard more in the House of Assembly more than people who sit there. So I am saying that if I didn't take decisions, if I didn't take action, if I relied on civil servants, nobody would blame me, they would blame the civil servants. So that is the kind of statement which I think from the beginning it starts on a false premise, and to respond to it, I'll be responding to something that is totally wrong.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. Mr. Hodge. Many persons have claimed that the success you proudly point to during your tenure in the corporate world came at the expense of your co-workers, and that you championed layoff and cuts in salaries in the name of profits. If you are elected, will you bring the same ruthless, cost-cutting mentality to the government workforce?
I think Mr. Banks, I've never heard of that. Let me say something. When I joined Cable Wireless had about 13,000 employees across the region. Today, Cable Wireless has about 700 or 800 employees. Do you think I'm responsible for cutting 12,000 something employees across the region? Cable Wireless is a corporation that's owned by a British firm, and directives are sent down, and they determine by the technology that they roll out what staffing requirements they need in every jurisdiction. Every jurisdiction. When I joined Cable Wireless, it used to cost $5.40 a minute to call the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. When I left Cable Wireless, it cost 30 cents EC, 30 cents to call the United States. What enabled that was technology. Technology, regrettably, unfortunately, replaces people. There was nothing ruthless about what Sutcliffe did. What you probably did not hear, is the best raises that the staff got while working for Cable Wireless happened under my leadership. What you probably did not hear is the best performing business in the region was the business in Anguilla under my leadership. That's not true today. What you did not hear is when Cable Wireless was putting a team of people to restructure the region, Sutcliffe Hodge was the only person that was called from the Leeward Islands, from the Eastern Caribbean, with the exception of one gentleman from Grenada, to reform the region. When they wanted representation as to who was going to put a vision forward for the culture in Cable Wireless, it was Sutcliffe Hodge who came up with a program. It's called the One Best Way. And the One Best Way training was delivered to everybody working for Cable Wireless across the region. And that whole concept came from Sutcliffe Hodge. You didn't hear about that, I'm sure. And Sutcliffe Hodge was one of few people from this region who was promoted to executive vice president when most of those roles were held by folks from the United Kingdom. White folks from the United Kingdom over the many years. You did not hear that. And I performed exceptionally well in that role. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. Ms. Webster. It is claimed that your responses during the campaign is dependent on the audience you are facing. Others claim you go to great lengths to avoid giving direct answers to questions asked. This made people question whether you can be trusted. What can you tell the Anguillan public tonight to convince them that if elected, trust will not be an issue for you?
Mr. Moderator, I want you to repeat that question. I want to make sure that I address absolutely all aspects of it.
It is claimed that your responses during the campaign is dependent on the audience you are facing. Others claim you go to great lengths to avoid giving direct answers to questions asked. This makes people question whether you can be trusted. What can you tell the Anguillan public tonight to convince them that if elected, trust will not be an issue for you?
Thank you very much. Mr. Moderator, it's an excellent observation insofar as I believe that all of our leaders must absolutely be challenged by all Anguillans on that trust aspect. And if I'm going to be one of the first ones, excellent. What I have been, I'll just talk about me for a little bit, because this is a personal question. I do not agree that I fashion my answers based on an audience. In fact, everybody will tell you that Pam Webster is one of the most consistent people when it comes to the representations I make to any audience. And my philosophies, you can check them as far back. I'm very, very committed to, in fact, my whole personal philosophy is grounded in that Gandhi kind of focus that you live your values and the society you leave behind you is dependent on those values. And one thing that we know about values is that they don't change. My values, in fact, my motivations for standing in this election, and it's totally grounded in values. My values, I want to see that the love, respect, the work ethos, the integrity, the ability to carry everybody to come to solutions in a harmonious way. It's all grounded in that personal philosophy. And I've been, one of my successes, in fact the success that I'm most known for in the world, has to do with my standing as a trusted advisor, all grounded in trust, and trust grounded in those values. So my whole existence turns on the fact that I'm a trusted advisor and somebody that earns trust and deserves trust.
Thank you very much. Mr. Warner, given your alleged business failures, explain to the electorate why you can make a difference if elected at a time when financial management of government finances is a critical election issue.
You know, after hearing the questions that you asked some of these guys, I think I like mine. The problem is not trying and failing. The problem is when you fall, if you have the ability to get up again. And I will always get up again. And I know that my success won't even self-depend on this election, because the battle will go on irrespective of the outcome of this election. I believe, as Michael Manley once said, when you suffer for a cause, that is struggle. Okay? Angola is at a point in its history where it needs leaders that are not just practical, but futuristic. We have a number of practical leaders, but they don't see very far into the future. We need leaders who are not afraid to do what is right, fair, and just. And we need leaders that understand that Anguilla is part of a greater community. Leaders that are capable of taking us to our rightful place in the global environment. You know, and I am always open to ideas. I consider all of my past failures as learning experiences. They have definitely made me able to stand up here and tell you the things that I'm telling you, because I have been there. I know what it's like. And I can watch young people and say, listen, the system right now is knocking you down, but get up, keep fighting. Okay? This is what we need. We don't need people who have gone ahead and used their parents' money and claim success on that. No, success is what you work for. Success is what you build. And Anguilla is my home, and I am fighting for that. I have 4 kids, and I want them to be able to call Anguilla home, and that will make me fight everybody at this table, anybody in the audience, because Anguilla belongs to all of us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. We will now have, each candidate will now receive 2 minutes in which to make your closing remarks. Please remember it's 2 minutes. So we'll start with, we'll start with Mr. Banks and we'll work our way down.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and I thank the listening audience for spending so much time with us. It's a little longer than we thought, and I think at the end of the day, it was a very incisive debate. The questions were very powerful and serious, especially the last one. This is a very critical election in Angola because we are coming from a period of challenge, and we are hoping that we can get to a period where there is hope and opportunities for all Angolans, that we can strengthen our economy and create that vision, that Angolan dream that we all strive for. And we need leaders who have a plan to take that forward. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to participate in this election process. I have a team of candidates who are very capable, and I think that based on the vision that we all share, we will be able to deliver what the people of Angola deserve. I'm looking forward to working after this election, wherever we are placed. But we as a party feel confident that the people of Angola will now understand what is required to make the difference. And we hope that as we go forward, we will find the resources to make that happen. And I say resources, I don't mean only revenue, I mean the human resources within our community, those who live in Angola and those who live abroad. We are all in this together. It is a partnership, not a partnership with Angolans only, it's a partnership with those persons who come to share in our development. Investors who come from outside of Angola, investors who live in Angola are ambitious and want to achieve great things for the people of Angola. Government must work with them, government will respect them, and show a mutual approach to dealing with the issues that affect us. The importance of governance is that you are supposed to be able to listen to what people say, but you're also supposed to be able to take decisions responsibly to lead your people to the place where they want to be and where you think is important for them to be. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. Mr. Warner.
The concern that a number of people has been asking me in this election is what can you do as an independent candidate? And my response is I can do a lot because I can represent your interests in the Anguilla House of Assembly. They also asked me who you're going to work with. I'll work with anyone who supports my ideas. My platform ideas are electoral reform, tax reform, immigration reform, energy, education, and health. Those are things that I hold very dear. So I am not affiliated with any party, but irrespective of which of there are 3 parties, irrespective of which of them win, then I will either be the AUF conscience or I will be the AUM brain. One of the two, either way. Anguilla is, as we keep saying, is at a critical point in its history. A point where if we don't move forward now, this island is likely to be abandoned again in its history. And let us not think that that is far-fetched. The climatic conditions forced the Amerindians to abandon Anguilla for a number of years. And the British tried to abandon it, and it's only because we were either tough or we were ignorant that we stayed here. But we made it home. And it's somewhere that today we can be proud of, but we are slowly losing it. And we have to stop the decline, we have to stop the decay. And one of the ways that we are going into decay is we are allowing our people to decay. It's one thing to look at Shoal Bay East and realize it don't exist anymore. But when you reach to a point where we have gone from a situation with 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we had a number of illiterate people that couldn't read, but they were bosses at counting. Today, everybody can read, even though texting is seen to be taking away a lot of our vocab in terms of spelling, but nobody can count. And this is a problem. You know, we have to fix these problems, and that is my passion. That is the reason why I'm running. I am running because I have looked at the electorate, I have looked at those running, and I haven't seen anyone that I can run for, and a friend of mine said, shut up and run, and I'm running.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. Ms. Webster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And before I speak to my brothers and sisters in District 1, I just want to say to the Chamber of Commerce, thank you very much for this opportunity. On behalf of the Anguilla people, I think this is one of the debates that can help us see what's important ahead, and I appreciate that initiative. I want to say to all our listeners, it's been a very long and very taxing evening of questions, but I believe that they were all very, very fundamental. The key thing is, going forward, and our mantra, our Win Campaign's mantra, is a new Anguilla now. In 1967, I believe, rather like Mr. Lee in Singapore, you know, it was a dismal place, and we saw our leaders come forward and move forward at that time together to deliver the kind of Anguilla. Sadly, I know many of them would not be very happy with where we've reached, because in a lot of ways, to me, being a child of the revolution, it feels like when we were starting. But I know that there's a lot of hope. I look at all our young people, and I'm speaking to you young persons. I see you, I hear you, I listen to you, and I am so inspired by you. That is why I'm standing, and I believe there's no other candidate that is as future-focused as I am. So much so, I see the future as a constituency, and I see that together with the 7 constituencies that we know, if we balance the needs of that constituency, we are going to be like Singapore long before 30 years. In fact, in the next 7 years, I think that we can come up with a plan. We've got the plan now. It's the fish plan. I am the symbol, and I'm the symbol fish. And FISH is also the acronym for Vision, Infrastructure, Social Development, and Healthcare. And with our plans and our detailed opportunities, which you have in the District 1 Development Plan, we will, with the model for Anguilla and our beloved island, will transform right before our eyes with competent leadership. New ideas, new leadership, new Anguilla now.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webster. Mr. Hodge.
I'd first like to thank the Chamber of Commerce for organizing this debate. This election is not about the Anguilla United Front. This election is not about the Anguilla United Movement. This election is not about the Love Party. This election is not about the independent candidates. This election is about all of us. It's about how we can move our people to a better position, having a sustainable economy and a better quality of life. This election is about a basic thing as having running water at an affordable price. That's what this election is about. This election is about jobs, good paying jobs for our people year round. That's what this election is about. This election is about energy, affordable energy, something that's been challenging us in Anguilla for many, many years. Reliable, affordable, extremely affordable energy that can help to reposition Anguilla's economy. That's what this election is about. This election is about education. It's about ensuring that every child in this country has an opportunity to pursue their potential, supported by a community that is willing to give them a chance. That's what this election is about. This election is about healthcare. We've been told talking about health care for many, many years, and health insurance, and doing little about it. Politician after politician, election after election, the same subjects come up, but nothing is being done about it. This election is about having a team of people who can fix that. The Dove Party is committed to working to deliver on these things, and we stand ready to work with anybody who is elected who will share that vision. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. We'll now have the vote of thanks, and this will be done by Mrs. Lily Moses. And just before I hand the microphone to Mrs. Moses, let me say a special thank you to each and every participant in this evening's debate, and also to the few but faithful members of the congregation / audience who came out to listen to what our candidates had to say. A special thank you for your presence. Mrs. Moses.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Good evening, everyone. We have now come to the end of the ACOCI's political debate 2015. We would now like to take this opportunity to first thank the leaders of the political parties, the Anguilla United Front and the Dove, Mr. Victor Banks and Mr. Sylkif Hodge, respectively, along with the independent candidates, Mrs. Pamela Van Webster and Mr. Stashel Warner, for accepting the invitation to participate in this event. We also like to thank the principal of the Aurelia Kelly Primary School, teacher Paula Etienne, for allowing us the use of their auditorium. Special thanks to our moderator, Mr. Winston Duncan, and timekeeper, Mr. Hakeem House. We'd like to take this opportunity to thank the media, Radio Anguilla, for airing the debate live, and KCN TV for recording it. Special thanks to the following businesses for their assistance: Black Orchid, Digicel Anguilla, International Computer Systems and Solutions, known as ICSS, and Couture Concepts. We would like to thank the Board of Directors of the Chamber and our membership for their support. And last, but certainly not the least, we thank you, our listening audience, for coming out, and those listening via Radio Anguilla. Do have a pleasant evening, and God bless.